B-2 stealth bombers have been moved to the Pacific.
Those multiple B-2 stealth bombers are in fact headed towards Guam.
Our B-2 bombers and B-1 bombers have executed uncontested surgical strikes against multiple missile facilities deep inside Iran.
The most advanced bomber in the world was pulled after the first day of the Iran campaign. Not because it failed, because it was too expensive to keep using. That single decision explains how modern wars are actually won. This is not a story about which aircraft is more impressive. It is a story about cost, control, and the cold calculation that sits behind every major military operation. Because when you strip away the headlines, what you are really looking at is a control problem. And the United States just solved it in a way that deserves your full attention. Modern air campaigns start by removing defenses first: radar, missiles, command systems. Once those are gone, everything becomes controllable. That is the context in which the B-2 Spirit entered the Iran campaign. The B-2 Spirit is the most capable bomber ever built. Stealth shaping that makes it nearly invisible to radar. The ability to penetrate layered air defense networks that would stop any conventional aircraft cold. A design so sophisticated that maintaining it requires climate-controlled facilities, specialized crews, and procedures that most air forces on the planet could not replicate regardless of budget. And it costs approximately $200,000 per flight hour to operate. The B-2s sent into Iran flew missions lasting well over 30 hours each. A single aircraft on a single mission was burning through more than $6 million in operating costs before it touched down. Across multiple missions, this becomes unsustainable fast. For the initial surgical strikes, that cost was unavoidable. Iran's air defenses were functioning, radar networks were active. In that environment, stealth is not a preference. It is a survival requirement. You send the B-2 because the alternative is losing aircraft and crews to threats that stealth eliminates entirely. But the moment those air defenses are gone, the strategic value of stealth drops sharply. Flying a $200,000 aircraft when you don't need to is not power. It is waste. Continuing to deploy the most expensive asset after the conditions that justified its use have changed is how campaigns lose momentum, not through battlefield defeat, through budget exhaustion. Expensive wars don't fail first, they stall. So the United States made a shift, not about capability, about control. The B-2 came out. The B-52 went in. The B-52 has been flying since 1952, still operational, still relevant. What it offers is not stealth. It offers sustainability at scale. The operating cost sits at approximately $70,000 per flight hour, less than 35% of what the B-2 burns through for the same hour in the air. The side that controls cost controls how long the war lasts, and the side that controls time controls the outcome. Over a campaign projected at 4 to 5 weeks, with an explicit acknowledgement that operations could extend significantly beyond that timeline, the difference between $200,000 and $70,000 per flight hour does not just add up. It compounds into a financial advantage that reshapes the entire architecture of the operation. Resources preserved on flight hour costs flow directly into munitions procurement, logistics support, and the sustained operational tempo that a multi-week campaign demands. Every hour a B-52 flies instead of a B-2 is money that stays available for the parts of the campaign that still lie ahead. The B-52 earns its cost through rhythm. It flies. It lands. It reloads. It goes again. Day after day, week after week. That rhythm wins long campaigns. More flights, more pressure, more control, more outcome. There is also a replacement cost reality that shapes every operational decision at the senior planning level. A single B-2 costs approximately $2 billion to build. Losing one is not simply a military setback. It is a $2 billion reduction in national capability that cannot be quickly replaced and that creates immediate political pressure regardless of how the loss occurs. An aircraft that expensive carries a risk premium that affects how commanders are willing to employ it. You do not send a $2 billion asset into an environment unless the mission absolutely requires it. Once the environment no longer requires it, continuing to expose that asset to any residual risk is a decision that rational planners will resist. The B-52 carries a fraction of that replacement cost. A loss remains serious. It carries human cost and operational impact, but it does not produce the kind of strategic disruption that losing a B-2 would generate. That difference in risk profile gives commanders far greater freedom to employ the platform aggressively and continuously across the full length of a campaign. Lower cost per flight hour, lower replacement cost, higher sortie rate, every advantage points in the same direction, toward sustainability, toward the ability to maintain pressure not just through the opening week, but through week 3 and week 4, and however many weeks the campaign ultimately requires. There is a common assumption in modern warfare, that the most advanced technology wins. That assumption captures something real about the opening phase of a conflict. Advanced technology wins those first critical hours when stealth is the difference between mission success and catastrophic loss. The B-2 is genuinely irreplaceable in that role, and no serious analyst disputes it. But wars do not end in 24 hours. They rarely end in a week. The Iran campaign was projected at 4 to 5 weeks before the first strike was executed, with explicit acknowledgement that the timeline could extend further. Across that kind of duration, the financial and logistical structure underlying operations matters as much as the performance specifications of individual platforms. The country that deploys its most expensive assets continuously from day one and finds itself unable to sustain operational tempo, by week 3 has lost something more important than a tactical engagement. It has lost control of the timeline. Control of the timeline is control of the outcome. The country that controls cost keeps pressure longer, and pressure decides outcomes. This is precisely why the bomber switch deserves to be understood as a strategic decision rather than a logistical footnote. The United States recognized that the phase requiring maximum technological sophistication had passed. Air defenses were down. The threat environment that justified $200,000 per hour operations no longer existed at the same level. Adjusting immediately to a platform that could sustain the campaign at a fraction of the cost was not a retreat from capability. It was the exercise of exactly the kind of judgment that separates campaigns that achieve their objectives from campaigns that run out of resources before the finish line arrives. That kind of decision requires discipline, not better technology, better judgment. Discipline to accept that the most impressive platform is not always the most appropriate one for the phase you are currently in. Discipline to resist the institutional momentum that pushes organizations toward deploying their premier assets continuously because it projects strength. Discipline to think about week 4 at the same moment you are executing week 1. Zoom out, and the principle extends well beyond any single aircraft or any single conflict. The nations that prevail in extended military competitions are not uniformly the ones fielding the most sophisticated technology at every moment. They are the ones that understand how to sequence their capabilities, preserve their resources, and maintain operational tempo when adversaries expect momentum to slow. They are the ones that recognized when the conditions justifying maximum expenditure had changed and adjusted before financial constraints started limiting their options. The bomber switch in the Iran campaign is a visible, concrete expression of that principle playing out in real time. It happened quickly. It happened deliberately. And it happened because the people making operational decisions understood something that rarely appears in public coverage of military operations. The goal is not to demonstrate the most impressive capability at every moment. The goal is to achieve the objective. And achieving the objective across a multi-week campaign requires managing cost and endurance with the same rigor applied to tactics and targeting. Every hour a B-52 flies instead of a B-2 is an hour of sustained pressure delivered at a cost that preserves future options. Every sortie generated at $70,000 per hour instead of $200,000 is a sortie that keeps the campaign financially viable for another day. Accumulated across weeks of continuous operations, those individual decisions aggregate into the structural advantage that allows a campaign to reach its conclusion rather than stalling under the weight of its own cost structure. The most advanced weapon wins the first day. The most sustainable system wins the war. And the side that controls cost decides how long that war lasts. If this is the kind of analysis you want more of, make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss what comes next.